everybody. So today we're going to walk through pivot tables and bar charts and pie charts. Let's get right to it. As always, I ask you to read I would pause and ask you to read these list of instructions on my first slide. Okay, notice the last rule says always have a clean copy. So that's what we're going to do. Take a tab like housing data, copy, bring it over to a file, boom, paste it. So you have a copy, and then work on the copy. Do not work on the original file in case you accidentally make a mistake you cannot recover. That's what we do when we do research. So we have this data set based on a housing survey. So what do I would like to do? Well, it'd be awesome if I could quickly figure out how many males we surveyed, or how many females we surveyed, or if we're looking at another category, marital status, how many married people did we survey, or how many people did we survey had a college degree. These are all valuable insights into how people buy houses in a particular neighborhood, or what type of people buy houses in a particular neighborhood. This is really good information that I like to have a summary of. So a pivot table is a great way to do that. So here we go. How does one build a pivot table? Again, at any moment, you should pause the video and play back the steps until you're clear on how to do these steps. So we insert, and right away, top left should be the pivot table. I am working with Office 365. If you have an older Office version, then you'll have to, quickly Google how to do it in other Office versions. I have it in my insert pivot table. And now I read the instructions. Select the table of data. And so I want everything. When I select data, I want it all. I want it all scanned in. Some people don't. I choose to scan it all, and I'll filter out what I need. Boom. Everything's scanned in from A1 to S267. Nice. And I always put it on a new worksheet, so I don't change that. If it doesn't say new worksheet, I'll put it there. And that's it, guys. Click OK. So here is your pivot table. I'm going to name it pivot. So that way, if I'm working on the sheet, I don't lose where I'm at. This is my data, really a copy of the data, and this is my pivot. Excellent. Notice the instruction manual over here went away. No problem. Click on your pivot again. Notice, click off the pivot, disappears. Click on the pivot. This thing, honestly, I would get used to it, play around with it. And think about this. You can play around with it, and you have no fears because of the fact you have a saved copy somewhere that's clean. So you can always just restart again. So here we go. Let's say we want the breakdown of males to females. All right, gender, pull it down to rows. And then whatever you put into rows, I put into this field called values. What this is really what tells the Excel program to add up. And in fact, it says it, count up gender. So here we go. It counts up the genders. First of all, it tells you there are two genders in this study, male and females. And this is the breakdown. And this is our first pivot table, contingency table, if you want to call it. After you're happy with your table, this is what I do. I right-click, copy, I move it to a new sheet, and I paste it as 1, 2, 3. That's very important to me. Paste as values. And there's my pivot table. Now we got to clean this up, but this is going to be my answers tab. So I'm going to label it answers. It's very important to me to paste it as 1, 2, 3. For if you don't, you bring the pivot table with you, and that often causes issues. So here is my first pivot table. Sweet. We'll come back to that later. And in fact, actually, before I come back to it later, we should make the pivot table look nicer. The row label, oh, come on now, this is gender. And this is just count. And there we go. We have a nice pivot table of gender and count for our data set. Let's go back. Now, let's say we wanted a count of Hispanic versus not. All right. We can throw down Hispanic in the rows. And what again, normally, whatever I put in rows, I drop to the values. I just naturally drop it. There are times you don't, and you can look at videos for that. That's more advanced pivot table. But whatever I want, whatever category I want in rows, I put here and here at the same time. And I make sure that says count. You can change that to a lot of options. So let's speak about that right now. That little drop box here, you can change the settings to sum, count, average, max, min. Again, these are advanced topics not discussed in our first video on pivot tables. You could change it to sum. I'll let you know. Let's do that. In this case, we're going to get useless information because what's going on is it just wrote into Excel, hey, add up the numbers, but there are no numbers to add up. So Excel's spitting back zero. It's instead of counting the ends, it's looking for numbers to add up, and there are none. So once again, go back to my settings, change it to count. What I do is I always make sure that says count because I use pivot tables for qualitative variables. That's very important. I use pivot tables for qualitative variables, not quantitative. Quantitative variables are not meant for pivot tables. That is just a huge major note you should take note of. Can you use quantitative variables here? We'll talk about that in a second, but the answer is normally no. Okay, so what do we got here? We have our breakdown of Hispanic not or Hispanic yes of origin, and that's cool. So we have another pivot table. We can copy that over to our answers tab, paste it as 1, 2, 3 again, change that to Hispanic origin, and that's count. And we have just created our second pivot table. Yay! And you can spruce this up nicely. Using the home menu, you have a lot of bolding, colorings, fillings. Please play centering. Please play around with all these things right here. Change the font size, they're underlined, italicized. You've got so many ways to make your pivot tables beautiful, right? Use this drop box to border it. Use this drop box to border it. That way you got borders on your pivot tables. Have fun being creative because what you're going to do in the end is copy and paste this into a PowerPoint or some document to present. All right, back to the pivot tables. Sometimes people want pivot tables broken down by 2 categories. No problem with that. For example, we talked about energy type, how to heat the house, the fuel. So we could drop the fuel into the columns. And look what we get right over here in our pivot table. We get the Hispanic origin question, and we get the gas type, the fuel type for the dwelling. And that's awesome. We have a nice broken down. Not really sure I need the Hispanic of origin, but I can see me wanting to see a breakdown of gender versus this. So I'm looking at this instead. Cool. And so I have this nice contingency table. Now, some people might say, oh, I don't like to have this many columns and that many rows. They prefer more rows than columns. It's just a neatness idea. Okay, we could do that. There's nothing wrong in putting field type here and gender here. Understand, you could, again, remember what I like to do, whatever's in the rows, I put over here. I make sure that says count. And look at it. We have this beautiful pivot table, once again, broken down by gender and how they heat their homes. Let's bring this over. The reason we're working on these is because these pivot tables, values, before I go on, values, these pivot tables, heating, lead us to our pictures. You need a pivot table, in my opinion, before you get a really nice picture. Merge and center is what I'm about to do here. See, merge and center, click, merges and centers over a few columns a particular header. And I like to see that when I'm building my multi-pivot table. And so there you have it, a nice 2x2 pivot table. That is, you have gender versus heating. It's not 2x2 because you had 2 categories here and you have 4 categories here. So the answer would actually be 4x2 if I was being correct. 4 categories by 2 categories. It's always row by columns. This would be helpful when we do an advanced test on does gender tell me anything about heating, vice versa. All right, back to pivot tables. Keep it focused. Now, let's say we had this pivot table. That's awesome, but we also wanted to really just look at the people of Hispanic origin. How can we do that? That's where this comes in. The filter is awesome because you can drop another category into here, and up here, notice it pops up. Drag it out, drag it back down. Please investigate, have fun. Remember, you have the clean copy backed up. This is just a play copy. Have fun with it. Draw some beautiful pivot tables. Notice I'm only picking the categories because that's really what I use pivot tables for. All right, back to the filtering. It's up here. You can do this, utilize this drop box, and look, you can either have all, the non-Hispanic of origin, and the yes to Hispanic of origin. So we can click on N, boom, and that filters my pivot table into 3 areas, right? We have the field type, we have the gender, and we also have the non-Hispanic origin in this data set. And that's really cool. So if you want to filter down, you really want to go dive deep into your data, this is one way to do it. Also, let me pause. You could have just used the filtered command and then filtered the data into the pivot table itself. I like to filter in my pivot table. Some people want to filter the table and then put it into a pivot table. You could have done that. I'll let you experiment that, but you're going to get the same answers. I like doing all my work in the pivot table because it's so versatile. Don't really need a filter this time, so I'm happy with this pivot table. Okay, so we have 3 pivot tables. I'm going to add a new section called graphs. So it's time to get into the graphs. Well, you needed the pivot tables before you could graph. That's very important. That's why I worked hard on these pivot tables. After we have the pivot tables, we can now insert our graphs. Now, before I do that, some people could say, well, these are counts. That's great. Could you also have percents? The answer is, of course, you can have percents. You could have gone back, and so I apologize. We could go back to here in our pivot tables, and we could say, the counts are great, the counts are nice, but I would love to have this broken down by percents. How does one do that? Well, you could do it by your own on the Answers tab. You could build it by your own by learning how to divide correctly, or you could utilize the pivot table. And if you right-click on one of the cells in the pivot table and look at Show Values As. Show Values As allows me to change how the cells are formatted. For example, if you wanted to look at them out of row total, let's see what happens, percent of row total. What we've done is changed the look of my pivot table. Now my pivot table breaks down each category of field type by percent of male versus female. 38% of males choose electric. 61% of males choose electric. And we got to be careful because this male and female are the people that responded to my survey. So we're hoping that household by the male choice most chose electric. Females, 50% for gas, 49% for male. And so what we have here is a nice pivot table based on row percents. If you want, you can copy that over to my answers. And so we have a nice side-by-side comparison of heating, capital lock on, heating versus gender. And I want to put it in per row percent. It's always important when you do percentages, you acknowledge how you did them. So we did row percents here. And once again, put a little beautiful box around it. If you notice, when I copied and paste, my data turned into decimals, and they did. I can easily change them back to percents by using the home page. Make sure you're on the home tab. There's a percent button. Please get used to the home tab. It has awesome ideas on it. Right here, a quick way to change numbers back to percents is right there. Click percent. All right, it made them all percents, no decimals. Maybe you want to add or decrease the number of decimals you see, and that's what these commands do. So there's more percents, less percents. More decimals, less decimals. Excellent. And so one can quickly do the math, by the way, to see where these come from. All right, guys, one can check the math out. And how do you check the math? Where did this 38% come from? All right, when I said it was a row total, right? I utilized row total. Well, think about it. First of all, in Excel, to activate the calculator, you got to use equals. because if you just type in Excel without the equals, you get nowhere. So you need to use the equals. 22, because that's how many female that choose electric, out of the total for electric was 57. Of course, I typed that in wrong, 57. When you divide, you get the 38.59, which is rounded to 38.6%. So I can pinpoint, and you should verify this. When you're using row percent or column percent or based on total percent, you should understand where each one of these percents is coming from, because you should be able to explain this to whoever you're building this PowerPoint presentation for. So again, 22 out of 57 is what I'm looking at, because I'm doing on row totals. 35 out of 57 because I'm basing on row totals. You have to understand which total you're dividing by to get the right percents. Again, you can utilize the pivot table for all your needs to change into percents. You can also just do a good old percent from straight up the data you have. For example, you have 107 females out of the 266 total, and that's 40% females. You have 159 males out of 266 total, so you have 59%. And of course, just to check we have our total, that divided by that is 1, so that's kind of silly. I'd rather state, let's add the sum command, great command to learn. I want to add sum, open the parentheses, scan in the numbers you want to add, close the parentheses, and add them up. And it gets 1. It's a good check to make sure you've written your code right when it comes to the relative percents. I'm going to add in that into my boxes. And yes, I'm going to change them to percents. Add a decimal, add 2 decimals, sorry, 2 decimals. Excellent. Let's do that for this. Once again, title, how do I get my relative percent? What I want divided by total. That's really what a percent is, right? It is number of correct, in this case would be number of Hispanic origin, divided by grand total. That's really what a decimal is, a fraction is. And then once again, I'm going to use the sum command to check my math. Add up all these options, should add up to 100% in my survey. If it doesn't, I know I've missed something. Once again, I'll format by the percent. Please understand, if you're not on the home menu, you may not see these buttons. And also, if you're not in the correct version of Excel, you got to be careful. Always be clear on the tab you're on, the Excel version you have. Cool. So that was just me having fun building percents. There are so many things you can do with this pivot table once you've built them. It's up to you how you would like to utilize them. Okay. Now I promised you pictures. So let's get into them. How does one draw pictures for qualitative data? The answer is pretty simple. You highlight your data. For example, if we're just doing the gender, we highlight the data. Insert, tab, go to recommended. The new Excel has gotten pretty good at guessing what you would like. So you do a recommended, and boom, it picked up column, if you like columns, male, female, pie chart, ooh, or bar. All three are awesome. I just clicked on the column. Now, if you don't like it, click off it, click on the picture. If you don't like it, hit the delete button. It's gone. Start again. Now, I'm going to try to get that gender in there. So I'm going to hit the gender and the titles. Let's see what happens. Insert, recommended. And now it has count, and that's, thought I'd have a better title. But maybe when I click in, we'll see. So what we have here is, which one would you like? You want a simple, nice column chart? Let's click OK this time. So we have a nice column chart. Beautiful. What can you do? A lot. Again, click off, nothing's going on. Click on it, you bring up the chart design menu. And there are so many, by the way, options you can choose from for you to build with. Your choice where you want to go. So let's say we choose this one. What I would do at bare minimum is make it clear on the counts. If you're using the counts, you can also use percents if you like. I'm using the counts, and make sure your title is very, very clear. My title, this would be counts of gender in my data set. Plus, over here, you're off the chart, it's not here. Back on the chart, there's a plus symbol. That plus symbol allows you to add in some cool things. For example, axes titles. I always want axes titles. Axes titles, what is this? This is gender. I like to make sure it's clear when I give a presentation counts. I like to be very clear on what is my X and Y when it comes to my set. And I'm very happy with this picture. Really, really cool. And now, when I got a great picture, the next step is to now talk about what you're going to do with that. Are there clearly more males than females? What does that mean? Vice versa. So we get a chance now, once we've drawn a pretty picture, to analyze and think about what this means for my survey, my research. Awesome, cool picture. All right, we can highlight our next pivot table, insert, recommended, and there we go. Once again, cool. If it doesn't give you one you want, by the way, there is always the all charts. And there are so many choices for all charts, all right, that you can play around with. I wanted the pie chart. I liked it. Clicked OK. All right. So the pie chart, a little lackluster right now. I'm looking for one that actually shows the percents because that would be cool. So I'm going to go up here and look at what options we have. And look at that. All right. This one right here, almost like the black letter, but this one has at least the percents in it. And that's really cool. Remember, with pie charts, you want percents shown. Now you might say, I want counts included. I believe one of these down here further also includes the counts. I guess not. So what we have here, you could, if you wanted the counts, you can include the pivot table on top or on the bottom of the pie chart. All right, you could not draw, but have the pie chart, and below it have the pivot table. So you can not only have a picture, you can have the data present for anybody asking, all right, what does 19 really mean? What does the 19% really mean? Because 19%, is that like 19 people, or is that a lot more people? So it's often good to show both the pivot table and the picture. Both tell us a story. We have a count and we have a percent. So as a rule of thumb, it's smart to show this picture and the pivot table so all audiences can have a clear indication of what's going on. Of course, we should have a nice title, right? So this would be what? This would be percent of Hispanic origin. Excellent. I can't spell percent, so let's change that. Excellent. Of course, what else options we have? Well, we already have them. If you want to take them away, you can uncheck them. If you want to play around with the coloring, go ahead. If you want to play around with some of this stuff, if you want to change the titlings, you want to change the coloring and the names, have fun. There's a lot of options you can do if you're not happy with what you see. You can adjust them as needed. Play around with these options to see what you think would be best for you in your presentation. I'm trying to get you used to how do you go from data to a pivot table to answers to graphs. I forgot I was supposed to put my graphs on this page. That's okay. They're all looking pretty good here. I got my one pivot table. I should put it above gender. By the way, no big deal. I can just copy, paste that over here, copy. Great thing about having fun, doesn't bother me because I have my clean copy all set when I need it. And then I can destroy these by right click, delete, and I'll shift the cells up. And so then move that back down. I can move this pivot table over. Actually, I'll put it up there. And I can destroy this pivot table. And really what I'm doing is cleaning up right now. Oops. This is good though. It's good to show you mistakes. As a teacher, I like to show sometimes mistakes because if you notice, the pie chart disappeared. The pie chart destroyed. Well, the data I had, I copied. So we got to rebuild the pivot table. Okay, no big deal. It's practice makes perfect, right, guys? So we highlight the data. Notice I'm not highlighting percents. I'm not highlighting grand total. If you highlight grand total will be in your picture. Not sure you want the grand total in your picture. So typically you don't want that. If you do, just highlight it. Recommended pie chart in to my picture. And of course, I wanted the one with a count. And what I have here again is percent of Hispanic origin. Excellent. And now I have a nice pie chart. And what I'm trying to do is show you that I would line them up underneath the pivot table. And then I would have that as a beautiful presentation. You have the numbers to talk about that, and you have the picture to go with it. You have the numbers and you have the picture to go with it. And there you have it. You have the bar charts and the pie charts. Now, let me condense this a little bit. And this is, by the way, I'm going really fast. So if you need to pause, you should pause this video. I expect you to pause. For example, there are certain things I'm using quickly, basic skills of Excel that you should learn how to do. Like, how do you delete columns? Well, you highlight the letters you want, right click, delete. And that brings things around. Copy, paste, delete, insert. Commands you should get used to in Excel if you want to move around pretty quickly in Excel. That's all I'm using here is copy, paste, delete, insert. Just been using it for a while, so I apologize for the speed. Now, got a cool pivot table here, right? Let's see how this pivot table works when we're talking about two categories. These are easy because they're one category. What's going to happen when we have two categories? Well, the way I always tell is please do not highlight the totals unless you want them in there. But typically, we never highlight the totals. They're going to be the largest bar no matter what, and they're just going to be hanging out, and people are like, why did you do that? Sometimes could really distort the data. Notice everything here is about 20 in height, and then we get a 107. You can imagine how that would distort the picture. All right, so highlight the data and the titles. Insert, recommended. And so now we have clustered column, we have stacked column, we have chart funnel pictures, and we have column pictures. Your choice. Notice there's no pie chart. If you want a pie chart, you're going to have to highlight each one individually. The pie chart doesn't come up natively like this. You'd have to highlight each one individually and build a pie chart, just like I did over here. But normally when you have many, many categories, this is really the chart you want to build. That is the clustered column. All right, so we move this over here so we can take a look at it and see what it shows and what it's lacking. I'm also right-click, insert, right-click, insert, getting some space here. Right-click, insert. So now I'm going to bring this back. So that's why this pivot table and this chart are lined up nicely. Okay, what do we have? Well, I already have my axes, male, female. I don't have a title here, so I can plus, add axes title. So this would be field type down here. And this would be count. And we already know the color of the bar represents the gender. So we have all the information, count, we have the highlight of gender, and we have the type of energy used at the house. So we can call this chart field type versus gender. Now I know, not the most impressive bar chart, but at least tells us what it does. Now, if you don't like the colors, change the highlighting. You can, again, have fun with the chart design. Click off, there's no chart design. Click on the chart, brings up the chart design, and you can go to your heart's content, changing colors, changing backgrounds, what you would like. Sometimes the picture's too pretty and you lose the data. I like to have the data and the picture together. Once we have this, there is the next level, and I hope you understand that. Once you have the picture and the data, you must explain any patterns you see. That's really what we're trying to do. What patterns do you see? What can help us when it comes to marketing in this neighborhood? What kind of relationships do you see in this neighborhood? That's what we're looking for. Once you have built the pivot table and its beautiful column chart. All right, one more time. just to finish it out. So these are percents, no big deal. Let's highlight them. Notice no totals. Please highlight the totals to see what happens. See how it's not a pretty picture. Once again, insert, recommended. I prefer the clustered column. This is, to me, a good picture when it comes to this scenario. I like the background. So field type. Still the same, field type versus gender. Cool. Add my axis titles. Yep. That way I can show you I got the fuel type. And now I'm going to use percent or percentage. Your choice. Excellent. And so what we have here now is a breakdown by percent. What should happen if I have not distorted them too much, if I look left to right, the shapes of these bars should be identical. And they are, right? If you look left to right, that is left to right being this chart, which is counts, this chart is percents. These should overall be of the same shape. Just because we went from counts to percents really should not change the shapes of my pictures. It's just another option. Which one's better? Well, that's up to you. All right. When you pick your chart type, you have to decide which is better in your presentation. The pivot table, same thing. Do you want count? Do you want percent? What is better to illustrate? Maybe you want both, and that could be two. Your choice. Thank you guys for watching this video on pivot tables, bar charts, column charts, and pie charts.